When I woke up after emergency heart surgery, I heard my daughter-in-law whisper outside my hospital room, "File the guardianship papers today. She won't even know what she signed." My son answered with just 3 words, "Do it now." I lay there without moving, pretending to be unconscious, while tears rolled into my ears. 7 days later, my bank card stopped working, my house was being sold, and I discovered my own children had convinced the court I was mentally incapable of running my own life. Thank you for being here with me. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had someone you trusted betray you when you were most vulnerable? Drop yes or no in the comments. Your voice matters here. A quick note. Some details are fictional for storytelling, but the core message is what truly counts. The pressure in my chest started as a whisper, then became a scream. At 64, I had owned Brooks Fabric and Sewing for 35 years, and that morning, June 9th, 2023. I arrived before dawn, as always, keys jangling as I unlocked the heavy door. The morning light streamed through the large front windows, making the silk bolts shimmer in shades of cream and gold. Everything smelled of fresh cotton and the faint trace of coffee I'd brewed in the back room. Perfect quiet. Just me and the store I loved more than anything except my son. I was rearranging fabric bolts on the upper shelf, preparing for next week's sewing class, when it began, a tightness behind my breastbone. Nothing alarming at first. I'd felt indigestion before, worked through worse. I kept reaching for the blue and white striped cotton, stretching to tuck it into place. Then the whisper turned into a fist. I couldn't breathe. The pressure crushed inward, a vice tightening with each failed gasp. My left arm went numb. The bolt slipped from my fingers and I grabbed for the shelf, but my hand wouldn't obey. The room tilted. I wasn't having indigestion. I wasn't tired. My body was failing catastrophically, and I was alone. I hit the hardwood floor hard, my hips slamming against the polished boards I'd walked across 10,000 times. The blue striped fabric landed beside me. I clutched it without thinking, the way a drowning person grabs at anything solid. My phone. Where was my phone? There on the counter, 10 feet away. I dragged myself across the floor, each movement a small war. My vision tunneled. The morning light through the windows blurred into white. My fingers found the phone. One number. Just one. I pressed it and heard it ring once, twice. "Mom." Brent's voice, groggy with sleep. "It's barely 7. Help?" I managed the words scraping out. "Brent, the store, can't breathe." Mom. His voice sharpened into panic. "I'm calling 911, stay on the line." I tried to answer, but the darkness was pulling me down. The last thing I saw was that morning light streaming through the windows, the exact same light I had looked at every single day for 35 years. I didn't know if it would be the last time. Then nothing. I woke to white. White ceiling, white walls, the rhythmic beeping of machines I couldn't see. The smell hit me next, antiseptic and something chemical that made my throat ache. My chest felt like someone had cracked it open and put it back together with wire and hope. "Mrs. Hampton?" A man's voice, calm and professional. I turned my head, even that small movement hurt, and saw him standing beside the bed. Dr. Russell Prescott, 61. My cardiologist with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that caught the fluorescent light. "The surgery was successful. You had a complete blockage in your left anterior descending artery. We performed an emergency bypass. You're going to be fine, but recovery will take time." Surgery. The word felt impossible. I'd gone to open my store, and now I was here split open and stitched back together. "How long?" My voice came out as a rasp. 4 to 6 months of careful monitoring and strict rest, Dr. Prescott said. "No stress, no exertion. You'll need continuous care during the initial recovery period." 6 months, the sewing classes, the inventory orders, the store. 35 years I had walked through that door. I didn't know if I'd ever see it again. The days blurred together after that. White walls, beeping machines, nurses who smiled with practiced sympathy. But what I remember most clearly were the visits. My son Brent, 36, arrived at the hospital every afternoon in his manager's blazer from the furniture retail chain where he worked, his face twisted with what I mistook for genuine concern. He held my hand. He asked the doctors questions. He brought me magazines I was too tired to read. And beside him always sat Roxanne. Roxanne, 34. My son's wife and a real estate broker positioned herself in the chair closest to Dr. Prescott whenever he made his rounds. She wore professional blazers and kept her dark hair pulled back in a way that made her look older than her years. And she took notes, meticulous, detailed notes on a legal pad she carried everywhere. I should have been touched by their attentiveness. They had been distant for years, busy with their own lives, visiting only on holidays. Now here they were, every single day, asking about my medications, my prognosis, my care plan. But something felt wrong. "The recovery will be gradual," Dr. Prescott explained on the 9th day, addressing all of us. "Mrs. Hampton will need assistance with daily activities for at least the first month. Physical therapy will be essential, and absolutely no stress, emotional or physical." Roxanne's pen moved across her notepad. I watched her write something, underline it twice. "Doctor," she said, her voice carrying that smooth, professional tone she used with clients. She leaned forward slightly, pen poised. "I have a question, if you don't mind." "Of course." "In case my mother-in-law cannot make medical decisions for herself," Roxanne said, each word carefully chosen, "who would hold that authority?" The room went cold. Dr. Prescott glanced at me, then back at Roxanne. "Well, that would typically fall to the next of kin or to someone designated through a power of attorney or healthcare proxy. If the patient is incapacitated and hasn't made those arrangements, the court can appoint a guardian to make decisions on their behalf." "And what constitutes incapacity?" Roxanne asked. Why was she asking this? I was lying right here, awake, alert, listening. "There are legal standards," Dr. Prescott said. "Generally, it requires a medical assessment showing the person cannot understand or make informed decisions about their own care." Roxanne nodded slowly, writing. Brent shifted in his chair, looking at his shoes. I smiled weakly at the doctor, my heart freshly repaired, suddenly aching in a way no surgeon could fix. Then I let my eyes drift closed, as if falling asleep, as if I hadn't heard every single word. But I had heard. And I didn't know it yet, but that question was the first move in a game I hadn't agreed to play. 10 days after Dr. Prescott explained guardianship procedures, they moved me to Blue Ridge Rehabilitation Center on the outskirts of Asheville. A clean but soulless private room hospital bed, wall-mounted television window overlooking a manicured lawn. Far from home. Far from the store. The card reader beeped 3 times, and the word "declined" flashed red across the screen. Nurse Calloway, an efficient woman in her 40s, tried the card reader twice before looking up with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hampton, but both cards are coming back declined. Would you like to try another method?" I stared at the small machine in her hands. My Visa card. The one I'd used for 30 years without a single problem. "Try the debit card," I said, my voice still rough from the breathing tube they'd removed days earlier. She swiped it. Same red flash. Declined. "I don't understand," I said, though a cold weight was already settling in my chest, a different kind of pressure than the one that had brought me here. I'd only wanted to purchase an internet package so I could video call the store, see the fabric displays, check on the Tuesday evening sewing class, feel connected to something that mattered. "Let me call the bank," I said. Nurse Calloway handed me the room phone, her face carefully neutral in that way healthcare workers perfect when they know something is wrong but can't say it. I dialed. The automated system answered in that cheerful robotic voice that made me want to scream. "Your account currently has a court-ordered hold," the recording stated. "For details, please contact your financial institution during business hours." I set the phone down carefully, very carefully, because if I didn't, I might have thrown it through the window. Court-ordered hold. A knock at the door saved me from the spiral. Vera Garrett, 63, had worked beside me for 25 years, and when she walked into that rehab room that first afternoon, I saw the fear in her eyes before she even spoke. "Loretta," she said, setting a fabric scrap bag on the plastic chair. A gift, a gesture, a reminder of what I'd lost. She sat down, angling herself so the nurse couldn't see her face. "What's happening?" I told her about the cards. She went very still. "I need to use an outside line," I said to Nurse Calloway. "Not the room phone. Is there one I can access?" 10 minutes later, I stood in a small alcove near the rehab center's administrative office, using my social security number and a secondary security password I'd set up years ago. The system connected me to a night shift operator. "Let me pull up the account," the woman said, her voice flat with late shift exhaustion. "Yes, I see an interim guardianship order from the Clerk of Superior Court, Buncombe County, dated June 16th, 2023. Guardians listed Brent Hampton and Roxanne Hampton. June 16th, 7 days after my surgery. 7 days after they'd cut my chest open and rewired my heart. While I was still in the ICU, still intubated, still fighting to survive. They had filed it then. "Thank you," I managed and hung up. Vera sat with me in that alcove for an hour, her hands gripping the fabric bag so tight her knuckles went white. Neither of us spoke much. What was there to say? That night, I lay in the dark rehab room, listening to the beep of a heart monitor from somewhere down the hall. 2 in the morning, 3, sleep was impossible. I thought about the funeral, my husband's funeral 35 years ago when Brent was only a baby. I remembered standing at the graveside in a black dress I'd borrowed from my sister, holding my infant son, wondering how I'd pay the mortgage. I'd worked double shifts at the accounting firm while running the fabric store on weekends. I'd turned down 2 lucrative offers to sell one for nearly $500,000 because the store was the one thing my husband and I had built together. I'd paid for Brent's college, his car, his wedding. I'd chosen them over myself, over the store, over everything. 3.5 decades of that. At 3 in the morning, I called the bank again. A different operator, but the same information. Interim guardianship, Brent and Roxanne, filed while I was unconscious. At 5 in the morning, I pulled the physical therapy manual from the nightstand and began the first exercise. If they wanted a sick and confused mother, I would show them exactly that. But only for as long as I needed. The visits started that week, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons like clockwork. Brent arrived with fresh flowers daisies, which I'd never particularly liked. Roxanne brought chocolates in expensive gold boxes. They were performing too. On the 3rd visit, Roxanne pulled a folder from her leather handbag and set it on the bedside table. "These are just authorizations so we can handle things if needed." "Mom," she said, using that daughter voice that had always sounded slightly off-key. "Medical decisions, financial matters, just in case. Sign here and here and initial here." I picked up the pen. My hand trembled not from weakness but from the effort of holding back rage. I signed slowly, deliberately, making the signature messy, letting the letters wobble and drift. Roxanne gathered the papers, her mouth tightening slightly. She'd wanted clean signatures, legal signatures. Brent looked away. He'd been doing that a lot lately, looking at his shoes, at the window, at anything except my eyes. "Your signature looks a bit shaky," Roxanne said. "Are you feeling all right? Maybe we should come back another day." No, I can do it," I said, my voice deliberately weak. "I trust you, sweetheart." Did Brent know when he looked away that I could see straight through him? After they left, I sat very still for a long moment. Then I reached under my pillow where I'd hidden a small scrap of paper and a ballpoint pen the day before and pulled them out. I wrote down a name and a phone number in careful, steady letters that looked nothing like the shaky signature I'd just performed. Vera Garrett, the only person on earth who knew the code to the safe behind the fabric store's cash register. The only person I could trust with what came next. I folded the paper once, twice, and slid it back under the pillow. I had exactly one advantage they didn't know about. They thought I was helpless. Vera came 3 days later. She appeared at the far corner of the rehab center's back garden on a Thursday afternoon, carrying a thermos and wearing a sun hat, like any visitor enjoying the August warmth. But her face told me everything before she even opened her mouth. We sat on a wooden bench under an oak tree, far enough from the building that no cameras could catch us close enough to the garden path that we looked like 2 old friends having tea. "I got your message," Vera said quietly, pouring something that smelled like chamomile into 2 paper cups. Her hands were steady, but I knew her well enough to see the tension in her shoulders. "Tell me." She set the thermos down carefully. "Roxanne came to the store twice in the past week." My chest tightened, not the crushing pressure of a heart attack, but something sharper, focused. "The first time," Vera continued, her voice low, "she walked through with a tablet measuring everything. Floor space, wall dimensions, the storage room. She took photos, lots of photos. And the second time, she came with a man in a suit." Vera's mouth thinned into a hard line. "Commercial real estate, I'd bet my life on it. They walked the whole store together. He had a clipboard. They talked about foot traffic lease terms, retail potential." The August sun felt cold on my skin. "She told Amy and Margaret, the owner is retiring," Vera said, "that the store will close in the next few months. She said it like it was already decided, like you'd agreed to it." I closed my eyes, breathed, opened them again. "The store is still in my name," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "For now," Vera said. "But with financial guardianship, they can petition the court for permission to sell. That's what the real estate broker was for. They're not waiting. They're planning." That store wasn't just a business. It was the place I'd poured every dollar, every dream, every piece of myself after my husband died. The place where I'd worked until midnight doing the books, then opened again at dawn. The place that had paid for Brent's college, his car, his future. And Roxanne wanted to sell it out from under me like it was just another property listing. "Then we need to move fast," I said. Vera looked at me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw recognition. She knew that voice. She'd heard it before years ago, when suppliers tried to cheat us or when the landlord threatened to triple the rent. That was the voice that didn't bend. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Sunday morning," I said. 3 days from now. The rehab center will be understaffed. Most of the nurses take Sundays off. I need you here at 8. Sunday came slow and fast at the same time. Vera arrived exactly at 8, carrying a bag of muffins, like she was just bringing breakfast for a friend. I closed my room door and turned the television on some cooking show with enough ambient noise to cover our voices. "Stand by the door," I told her. "If anyone comes, knock twice." She positioned herself in the hallway while I dialed the number I'd memorized 12 years ago. Asheville Federal Credit Union. A small institution on the north side of town, the kind of place where they still knew their members by name. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Asheville Federal, this is Mr. Dennison speaking. How can I help you today?" Mr. Dennison, a senior account manager who'd known me for over a decade, confirmed my identity within minutes. Social security number, mother's maiden name, the exact date I'd opened the account. "Mrs. Hampton," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "We've been trying to reach you. There's a notation on your main accounts about a court order, but this particular account—" "I know about the court order," I cut him off. "That's why I'm calling. I need to move the funds from account ending in 7739. A pause. "Of course. Where would you like the transfer sent?" "I want to open a new account, separate from everything else, and I need to authorize an agent to handle the transfer for me." "I have your emergency authorization form here from August 2020. Mr. Dennison said, and I could hear papers rustling. "Ms. Vera Garrett is listed as your designated agent. Is she the one you'd like to authorize?" "Yes." "I can process this transfer today. The new account will have biometric access, only fingerprint and retinal scan when you're able to come in person. In the meantime, I'll set it up with maximum security protocols." "How much is in that account?" I asked, though I knew. I just needed to hear it confirmed. $92,500. The money from my parents' farm, the piece of land they'd left me when they died, the one thing I'd sold and saved instead of spending. My emergency fund, my insurance policy, my weapon. "Transfer all of it," I said. "Today." 20 minutes later, Vera's phone buzzed. She stepped back into the room, face carefully neutral. "It's done," she whispered. $92,500 in the new account. Only you can access it." I exhaled slowly, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. They thought I was helpless, broken at their mercy. What would they do when they discovered I still had teeth? "Now call my attorney," I told Vera, my voice steady and cold. "Hartwell and Associates. Tell them I need an urgent consultation regarding a motion for restoration to competency under North Carolina General Statute 35A. Vera pulled out a small notepad. "What do I say when they ask who's calling?" "Tell them Loretta Hampton is calling. Tell them it's regarding an illegal guardianship. And Vera," I met her eyes, "do not use the store's phone. Use yours. And don't call from anywhere near Brooks Fabric and Sewing." She understood immediately. Roxanne might be watching the store, might have access to the phone records. "I'll do it from my car," Vera said, "in the grocery store parking lot across town." Good. After she left, I sat in that sterile rehab room and let myself feel it. Not hope, not yet, but something close. Something that felt like the first move in a game I actually knew how to play. The war had begun, and they didn't even know I'd left the battlefield. Vera made the call that afternoon from a grocery store parking lot 20 minutes outside Asheville. Attorney Hartwell's office said they'd review my case and call back within 48 hours. 5 days later, they walked in smiling like they'd won the lottery. Brent and Roxanne arrived together on August 15th mid-afternoon when the rehab center was at its quietest. They'd brought flowers again, roses this time expensive ones, and positioned themselves on either side of my bed like bookends. "Mom," Brent said, and his voice had that careful brightness people use when they're about to deliver news they think is good. "We have great news. The judge approved our petition. We're officially your guardians now, which means we can make all the decisions about your care. You don't have to worry about anything anymore." Roxanne leaned forward, her smile sharp and professional. "And we've sold the house. Can you believe it? We got $498,000 over asking price. The closing is set for September 12th. My townhouse, the place I'd lived for 22 years, gone. We've already found you a wonderful place." Roxanne continued, pulling out her phone to show me photos. Sunrise Gardens Assisted Living, beautiful facility medical staff on site 24 hours activities every day. Your room will be ready September 20th. We've taken care of everything. I looked at the photos. Beige walls, floral curtains, a single bed with a quilted coverlet that looked like it came from a hotel catalog. Not just approved, not just planned, executed. Every step already in motion, timed perfectly, leaving me exactly 5 days between the house closing and my scheduled transfer to permanent institutionalization. "Thank you for taking care of me, children," I said, my voice flat and colorless as dead air. Brent shifted uncomfortably. Roxanne's smile widened. After they left, I sat very still in that rehab room and counted days. September 20th, 4 weeks away. 4 weeks until they locked me in a beige room with floral curtains and threw away the key. Unless I disappeared first. The next 3 weeks moved in a strange dual rhythm. During the day, I played the part they expected, weak, confused, grateful for their help. During the night, I worked with Vera to plan something they'd never see coming. September 6th, Vera called. "There's a moving truck," she said, her voice tight. "Outside your townhouse. Roxanne's there directing them." I wasn't there to see it. I experienced my own dispossession through phone calls, through Vera's careful descriptions, through the particular quality of silence that meant she was watching something she knew would hurt me. "Your oak dining table," Vera said. "They're loading it into the truck right now." That table. We'd bought it the first year the store turned a profit, back when Brent was still learning to tie his shoes. My husband had carried it home in the back of our old pickup truck, and we'd eaten dinner at it every night for 15 years, until cancer took him. "What else?" I asked. Over the next week, Vera gave me the inventory, the sofa, the bedroom furniture, the framed photos from the hallway, Brent taking the keys to my 2019 Camry and driving it away. "Did they take the small wooden box on the bookshelf?" I asked on September 15th, the day before the house officially changed hands. Vera paused for a long moment. "Yes," she said quietly. Roxanne put it into her handbag. Inside that box was my husband's wedding ring, the photo of him taken on the grand opening day of Brooks Fabric and Sewing, standing in front of the store with his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning like we'd conquered the world. Roxanne had put it in her handbag like it was just another trinket. I closed my eyes, breathed, kept breathing. "September 19th, I told Vera, 11:15 p.m., be ready." The night shift at Blue Ridge Rehabilitation Center changed at 11 o'clock. Vera had scouted the building weeks earlier and found the blind spot and emergency exit in the east hallway. No camera coverage alarm disabled during shift change to let staff come and go for breaks. We had a 15-minute window. At 10:45 p.m. on September 19th, I changed out of the hospital gown and into the civilian clothes Vera had smuggled in days earlier. Jeans, a sweater, real shoes, not slippers. The final room check came at 10:50. I pretended to be asleep. At 11:12 p.m., I heard the soft knock. Vera had a wheelchair, but I barely needed it. 3 months of secretly pushing myself through physical therapy had paid off. I could walk. Not far, not fast, but enough. We moved through the east hallway in near total silence. The emergency exit clicked open. Cool September air hit my face, the first air I'd breathed that wasn't filtered through hospital ventilation systems since June. Vera's SUV was parked 50 meters away, tucked between two larger vehicles, where the overhead lights didn't quite reach. We reached it in under 4 minutes. "Are you sure about this?" Vera asked as she started the engine. I looked back at the building, at the lit windows where other people slept in rooms, just like mine, waiting for families who might or might not be planning to steal their lives. As of tonight, I said, no soul on earth gets to decide my life but me. Vera drove west away from Asheville toward the mountains I could feel more than see in the darkness. I sat in the back seat and watched the rehab center building shrink in the rearview mirror, like a bad dream dissolving at dawn. We didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. There was nothing to say. Everything had already been said in the 3 months of planning, of careful preparation, of building a case they didn't know existed. Then somewhere on a dark mountain road with nothing but trees and stars around us, I smiled. The first real smile in 71 days. We drove west toward the Blue Ridge Mountains, toward a place they didn't know existed. I didn't know what was waiting for me out there. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty, as of this moment. I was done being anyone's victim. They would wake up tomorrow and find an empty bed, and they would have no idea where to look. We arrived at dawn. The cabin smelled like pine and possibility. Vera had rented it weeks earlier using cash from my emergency fund, my name appearing on exactly 0 documents. A small wooden structure in Mills River tucked into the western Blue Ridge, where the morning fog blanketed the valleys and the nearest neighbor was half a mile away. I spent the first week learning to breathe again. Not the mechanical breathing of hospital ventilation, but the deep, clean inhale of mountain air that didn't taste like antiseptic. Marjorie Keene, a semi-retired physical therapist in her late 60s, visited twice a week for cash payment, pushing me through grueling cardiac recovery protocols that left me exhausted and stronger all at once. Every morning I walked, 10 minutes the first week, gradually increasing. Every afternoon, Vera and I built my legal case, logging every lucid decision I'd made since surgery, compiling a witness list documenting the timeline of their betrayal. "The motion is filed," Vera told me on October 1st, her voice careful on the phone. "Attorney Hartwell submitted it to the clerk this morning, December 15th, 9 in the morning, Buncombe County Clerk's Chambers. 2.5 months away, 75 days to stay hidden, stay strong, stay alive." On October 14th evening, Vera called with news that made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my heart. "The fabric store is locked up," she said. "Roxanne convinced the landlord you fled and have no plans to return. They're discussing terminating the lease." "No," I said the word coming out sharp, "not the fabric store." But there was nothing I could do. Not yet. Not until December 15th. 6 days later, Vera spotted the silver Tahoe. "That vehicle has been parked on the Ridge Road 2 days in a row," she said, showing me photos on her phone. "Same spot, different times. I got the plate." She ran the search that afternoon. The vehicle belonged to Pinnacle Investigations, Asheville. Brent had hired a private investigator to hunt me down. How does it feel to be hunted by your own child? "If they track you down before December 15th, Vera said quietly, "Brent can use your flight to argue you lack mental competence. He can tell the clerk you're unstable, that you ran away from medical care, that you're not capable of making decisions." "I know," I said. "We could move you further out. I have a friend with a cabin in Tennessee." "No." I looked out at the Blue Ridge ridgeline, the mountains I'd known my whole life. "We stay, but we randomize everything. Different schedule every day. I'll use your friend's cabin in Black Mountain as a backup rotate between the 2 locations. Make it harder for them to establish a pattern." Vera nodded slowly. "You're not running anymore." "I'm done running." Before I reveal what Brent saw at the fabric store, comment A, if you think he'll choose his mother, or B, if he'll stay with Roxanne. Add a quick reason in 5 to 10 words. Please note the next part includes some dramatized details for storytelling, but the core lesson remains true. November 8th changed everything. Vera called me at 6 in the evening, her voice tight with something I couldn't immediately identify. "I was at the store," she said, "checking on things. Roxanne showed up. And she had a man with her. Attorney, I think. They had papers. I watched through the glass doors. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw enough." "Tell me." "It was a sales contract for the fabric store. She laid it out on the counter, showed it to her attorney. I saw your signature on the execution line." My signature, on a contract I'd never seen. "Brent walked in," Vera continued. "He looked confused. He asked, 'What is this?' Roxanne said something like, 'Just a formality,' and tried to gather the papers. But Brent grabbed them. He read it. I watched his face drain of every bit of color. I closed my eyes, listening. Their voices rose loud enough that I could hear it through the glass. He said, 'You can't do this. This is a forged signature. This is criminal felony.' Roxanne snapped back at him. 'Well, your mother is out there committing the crime of fleeing custody.' They argued. Then they stormed out." I sat very still in that cabin phone pressed to my ear, feeling something I hadn't felt since June. For the first time since the heart attack, I felt something other than rage toward my son, the faintest ember of hope. My son knew the boundary line, late, but he knew it. 4 days later, on November 12th, I met Dr. Prescott at a small clinic in Black Mountain. The appointment was booked under Vera's name. I arrived in ordinary clothes, looking like any other patient. Dr. Prescott walked in and stopped short. "Mrs. Hampton," he said, and I couldn't read his expression. "I was deeply worried when I couldn't reach you after discharge. Now I understand why." "I needed to disappear," I said simply. He nodded once, sat down, and opened his medical bag. The evaluation took 90 minutes. Heart function tests, cognitive assessments, a financial decision-making exam that would have been insulting if it wasn't so necessary. When he finished, he sat back and looked at me with something close to amazement. "Heart function is at 78% of pre-surgery baseline," he said. "MMSE, score 30 out of 30. Mrs. Hampton, this recovery is remarkable." He wrote for another 20 minutes, filling 4 pages with detailed medical observations, then signed and sealed the report with his medical license stamp. "This goes directly to Attorney Hartwell," he said, "for submission to the clerk before the December 15th hearing." "Thank you," I said. He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I hope you win." On the drive back to the cabin, Vera asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you want Brent and Roxanne to know about the December 15th hearing?" I thought about my son. The way his face had gone white when he saw his wife forge my name. The way he'd called it what it was, a criminal felony. "Not yet," I said. "Let me choose the moment." And that moment I knew would be dictated entirely by me, not my son's private investigator. I just didn't know he'd find me first. I saw him before he saw me. November 22nd. 1 week before Thanksgiving. I had decided the December 15th hearing would be my moment to reappear, controlled, deliberate, on my terms. Until then, I would stay invisible. That morning, I walked into Ingalls Market in Mills River, completely alone for the first time in 4 months. No Vera, no Marjorie. Just me, a light aluminum cane in my right hand, and a grocery list in my pocket. The cane was more precaution than necessity. Dr. Prescott had cleared me for independent mobility 3 days earlier. My heart had recovered to 78% function. I moved slowly down the cereal aisle, placing oats into my basket. The fluorescent lights hummed. A woman pushed a cart past me, her toddler babbling about crackers. Normal. Ordinary. For a moment, I felt like a person again instead of a fugitive. Then I saw him. Brent stood at the far end of the aisle, frozen, staring at me. No Roxanne, no lawyer, no entourage. Just my son alone, looking like he had aged 10 years and 5 months. His hair was uncombed, his jaw covered in stubble. His eyes, those same hazel eyes I had looked into the day he was born, were red-rimmed and hollow. He wore a wrinkled button-down and jeans that hung loose on his frame as if he had lost 20 pounds. He looked exactly like a man whose marriage had fractured and whose mother had vanished. He did not move. I placed the oats carefully into my basket, then straightened. I met his gaze and waited. He took 3 steps forward, stopped, opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands trembled. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked on a single word. "Mom." I did not respond. I simply stood there, one hand on my cane, the other on my basket. I had imagined this moment 100 times in the Mills River cabin, what I would say, how I would react. But now that it was here, I felt nothing but cold clarity. He stepped closer. "I didn't know if you were—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "The P I found you 2 days ago. Pinnacle Investigations. I hired them in October. They tracked Vera's car registration to this area, then watched the grocery stores." I said nothing. "I came alone." He continued desperately. "Roxanne doesn't know I'm here. She thinks I'm at a regional manager meeting in Charlotte." Still I waited. He rubbed his face, exhaled shakily. "Mom, the police opened an investigation 3 weeks ago. Fraud, elder exploitation, falsified guardianship documents. Roxanne's name is on everything. The forged signature on the fabric store contract, Vera's statement matched the handwriting analysis. The district attorney's office is building a case." I felt my pulse quicken but kept my expression neutral. "I gave them everything," Brent said quietly. The June 16th, filing the power of attorney documents, the fabric store sale records, the townhouse transaction. I testified under oath that I never signed any consent for guardianship, that Roxanne handled all the paperwork while you were in rehab. He paused, searching my face for some reaction, forgiveness, anger, anything. "But I also came because I needed to see you," he whispered. "I needed to know you were alive." That was the moment I understood something I had not fully grasped before. My son was not my enemy. He had been weak, yes. Complicit through passivity, absolutely. But he had not been the architect of my destruction. He had been the tool Roxanne used to execute it. And now that tool had broken in her hands. But understanding is not the same as forgiveness. I set my basket down, then straightened to my full height. Without the cane, I was 5'7". With it, I felt 10 feet tall. "You want to see me?" I said, my voice steady and cold. "You're looking at me right now, Brent. I'm standing here without a wheelchair, without a guardian, without your permission. I'm alive. I'm competent. And on December 15th, I will walk into that courtroom and prove it to a judge." His face crumpled. "Mom, please. I know I failed you. I know I should have questioned everything from the beginning. I should have fought harder. I should have protected you." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." He flinched as if I had slapped him. I picked up my basket, shifted my weight onto my cane. "But if you truly want to see me, if you truly want to explain yourself, then you'll meet me on my terms." He blinked. "What?" "Grove Park Inn," I said clearly. December 10th, 10 o'clock in the morning. The lobby lounge. Just you and me. No Roxanne, no lawyers, no police. You come alone or you don't come at all. Brent stared at me, stunned. "December 10th. That's 5 days before the hearing." "I know exactly when it is," I replied. "Do you agree or not?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll be there." "Good." I turned slightly toward the checkout lanes. "Vera will contact you with the exact location in the lobby. If I see anyone else there, a PI, a lawyer, Even Roxanne sitting in a car outside. I will leave, and you will never hear from me again. Do you understand?" "Yes," he whispered. I took one step forward, then stopped and looked back over my shoulder. His face was a portrait of exhaustion and grief, a man who had finally realized the cost of his silence. "One more thing," I said quietly. "You called me Mom when you saw me standing here. You saw me walking healthy free, and the first thing you did was cry. So let me ask you something, Brent. When Roxanne told you I was incapable of caring for myself, when she said I needed a guardian, when she handed you those documents to sign, did you even stop to wonder if she was lying? Or did you just trust her because it was easier than questioning your wife?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I turned my back on him, gripped my cane firmly, and walked toward the front of the store. My legs did not shake. My heart beat steadily in my chest. Behind me, I heard him take one step forward, then stop. I did not look back. By the time I reached the parking lot, Vera was waiting in her sedan, engine running. She saw my face and asked no questions. I climbed into the passenger seat, set my cane across my lap, and closed the door. "Drive," I said, and she did. The night before a war, you check your weapons. Vera drove me straight to the Mills River cabin, no words exchanged until we stepped through the door. December 9th evening, 24 hours until Grove Park Inn. I set my cane against the stone hearth and lit the fire myself. Vera spread the evidence across the oak dining table like a surgeon laying out instruments. Dr. Prescott's 4-page medical report sealed in its manila envelope. The motion for restoration to competency stamped and docketed for December 15th. Bank statements showing the June 16th account freeze. High-resolution photographs of the forged signature on the fabric store contract. And a flash drive containing the audio recording of my call to Asheville Federal Credit Union. Everything had been backed up. Duplicate copies delivered to Attorney Hartwell 3 weeks earlier. Nothing left to chance. Vera poured us each a cup of chamomile tea, sat across from me at the table, and asked the question I had been avoiding all day. "Are you afraid?" I looked at the fire crackling in the hearth, then at the folders arranged in perfect rows before me. I thought about the woman I had been 35 years ago, widowed at 29, left alone with a newborn son and a fabric store buried in back rent I could not pay. I had been afraid then. Terrified, actually. Afraid of losing the business, afraid of failing my child, afraid of becoming invisible. But this was different. "I was afraid 35 years ago," I said quietly, "when my husband died and I was left alone with an infant and a fabric store buried in back rent. I am not afraid of this." Vera nodded once, sipped her tea, and asked no further questions. At 9:47 that night, I called Dr. Prescott from the cabin landline. He answered on the second ring. "Can you be at the Grove Park Inn at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning?" I asked. There was a pause, then, "Does my patient need me?" "My evidence needs you," I replied. "I will be there," he said. I hung up, placed the receiver back in its cradle, and went to bed. I did not sleep, but I rested. December 10th, 10 o'clock in the morning. The Grove Park Inn conference room was everything I had imagined when I chose it. Historic stone walls built in 1913, a long oak table polished to a mirror finish, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Blue Ridge Mountains in winter light. Dignity, permanence, witness. I arrived 15 minutes early. Vera stood outside in the hallway, positioned where she could see anyone approaching. Dr. Prescott waited near the entrance door, his leather medical bag in one hand, the sealed envelope in the other. I arranged the 3 folders on the table in perfect alignment, poured myself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher, and sat down. My hands did not shake. At 10 o'clock exactly, Brent and Roxanne walked through the door. Roxanne looked confident, navy blazer heels, hair styled perfectly. Brent looked like a man who had not slept in days. His eyes found mine, held for 1 second, then dropped to the table. I gestured to the chairs across from me. "Sit." They sat. I did not waste time on pleasantries. I opened the first folder and slid it across the oak surface toward them. "Folder 1, I said calmly. "Bank records from Asheville Federal Credit Union showing the account freeze you authorized on June 16th, 2023. Also included audio recording of my call to the bank that same day, confirming no official notice was ever served under North Carolina law. The hold was illegal." Roxanne's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I opened the second folder. Folder 2. high-resolution photographs of the forged signature on the Brooks Fabric and Sewing sale contract. This is forgery, a Class 1 felony under North Carolina General Statute 14-119. Vera Garrett's notarized statement confirming the handwriting analysis is already with the district attorney's office. Brent closed his eyes. Roxanne leaned forward, fingers pressed flat against the table. I opened the third folder. Folder 3. Court confirmation that the motion for restoration to competency was accepted by the Clerk of Superior Court and docketed for hearing on December 15th, 5 days from now. This Roomstone and History and Mountain Light was the furthest thing from that rehab center bed where they had tried to bury me. Roxanne stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice was sharp, commanding exactly the tone she had used in June when she told the nurses I was confused. "You lack the mental capacity to—" The conference room door opened. Dr. Russell Prescott stepped inside, walked directly to the table and placed a sealed white envelope in the center of the oak surface between us. He did not look at Roxanne. He looked at me, nodded once, then turned to address the room in the same steady voice he had used when he cleared me for independent mobility. "This is the Comprehensive Medical Capacity Report for Loretta Ann Hampton, formally filed with the Clerk of Superior Court on November 12, 2023. Mini mental state examination score 30 out of 30. Cardiovascular recovery 78%. Independent living capability fully restored. I am fully prepared to testify before the clerk on December 15th. He set his medical bag on the floor beside my chair, folded his hands, and waited. Roxanne dropped back into her seat as if her legs had been cut out from under her. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat, strong, steady, perfectly repaired. I leaned forward, my palms flat on the table, and spoke directly to the woman who had stolen 6 months of my life. "This is my ultimatum. You will return every dollar taken from my retirement accounts and home sale proceeds within 30 days. You will sign voluntary consent to terminate the guardianship immediately. You will do both, or I will take this exact file to the Buncombe County District Attorney this afternoon and press charges for elder exploitation fraud and forgery." Brent opened his mouth, but no words came out. Roxanne stared at me with something I had never seen in her face before: fear. I gathered the folders with steady hands, stood, and looked at my son. Really looked at him for the first time since June. "You have 24 hours to decide," I said, my voice as calm as if I were reading a fabric invoice order. "I'll be waiting." Then I walked out into the December light. The silence before the phone rang felt like holding my breath underwater. I had stayed at the Grove Park Inn that night, December 10th into the 11th, not because I needed the room, but because I needed the distance. I sat in the dark, staring at the Blue Ridge silhouette beyond the window, wondering if the phone would ring within 24 hours, or if I would be walking into the district attorney's office instead. At 7:23 in the morning it rang. I picked up on the second ring. No greeting, just silence on the other end, followed by a breath that sounded like someone who had stayed up all night. "Mom," Brent's voice was raspy, broken. "It's me. We separated last night, right after we left the hotel." I said nothing. I waited. "I called my own attorney," he continued, the words tumbling out fast, now desperate. "Not the one we've been using, my own. He said I need to cooperate fully, that what we did was—" He stopped, exhaled shakily. "He said I need to make this right." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white against the plastic. "I signed the paperwork," Brent said quietly. "Alone. I'll return my share, half of the retirement funds, and half of the home sale proceeds within 30 days, I promise." "What about Roxanne?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a long pause. Then, "She said she's hiring her own trial lawyer and will fight everything. That's her choice." I closed my eyes. For the first time in 6 months, my son had operated entirely independent of his wife's shadow. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like watching something shatter that could never be fully repaired. "The hearing is still scheduled for December 15th, I said. "I'll see you there." I hung up before he could respond. 4 days between that phone call and the courtroom. 4 days to decide what forgiveness might look like, or if it was even mine to give. December 15th, 2023, 9 o'clock in the morning. The chambers of the Clerk of Superior Court in Buncombe County Courthouse were nothing like the Grove Park Inn conference room. This was a small utilitarian space with wooden benches, harsh white fluorescent lighting, and no windows. No dignity, no permanence. Just the cold machinery of the law. Attorney James Hartwell sat beside me, a sharp-eyed man in his early 50s who specialized in elder law and who had spent the last 3 months building the documentation we needed to dismantle the guardianship brick by brick. His thick file sat open on the table before us, every page flagged and cross-referenced. Dr. Prescott sat in the witness chair to my left, his hands folded calmly in his lap, the sealed medical report already submitted to the court. Brent sat alone in this very back row, his face pale and drawn. He had arrived 10 minutes early but had not approached me, had not spoken, had simply taken his seat and stared at the floor. Roxanne was absent. Her new counsel had filed a separate contest, but she had chosen not to appear in person. Coward, I thought, or strategist, possibly both. Clerk Morrison entered at precisely 9 o'clock, a stern woman in her 60s who had presided over Buncombe County guardianship cases for 20 years. She wore reading glasses on a silver chain and carried herself with the weight of someone who had seen every variation of family betrayal and knew exactly how to cut through the performance to find the truth. She sat open the file and began. The hearing lasted 47 minutes. Dr. Prescott's medical assessment was read into the record in full cardiovascular function, recovered to 78%. Mini mental state examination score, 30 out of 30 financial decision-making capacity, flawless and fully restored. He answered 14 questions from the clerk with clinical precision, never once wavering. Then it was my turn. Clerk Morrison looked at me directly, her eyes steady behind her glasses, and asked 12 questions. Not about my heart, not about my memory, about my understanding, my autonomy, my capacity for self-determination. I answered each one clearly, coherently, without hesitation. "Mrs. Hampton," she said, finally removing her glasses and setting them on the table. "Do you understand the full scope of legal authority you are requesting be restored to you today?" "Yes," I said, "I do." "And do you believe yourself capable of managing your own financial affairs, medical decisions, and legal matters without the oversight of a court-appointed guardian?" "EK. I have been capable of managing those affairs for 64 years, I replied. "I was capable on June 9th when I had a heart attack. I was capable on June 16th when the guardianship was filed without my knowledge, and I am capable now." Clerk Morrison nodded once, then turned to her notes and wrote in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Hampton, based on the medical evaluation provided by Dr. Russell Prescott and your demonstrated competence here today, I am revoking the guardianship order in full under North Carolina General Statute Chapter 35, A, effective immediately." She signed the order with a black pen, then reached for the court stamp. The stamp hit the paper with a sound like a door closing or opening. "You are hereby fully restored to total legal competence," she said, sliding the signed document across the table toward me. "All restrictions are lifted." I took the order into my hands with a steady grip. The paper was still warm from the stamp. I smoothed my jacket, and turned to look at my son. Brent remained seated in the very back row, his eyes cast down, making no move to stand. I said nothing to him. But I did not look away immediately either. I let him see me standing completely straight, holding the clerk's signed order in my hand, the woman he had tried to bury, now fully resurrected by her own will. Then I walked out into the light. He would call again 3 more times that week, and eventually I would answer. But first I had something more important to do. The morning light looked exactly the same. December 22nd, 2023, 3 days before Christmas, 7 days after the courthouse. That more important thing I needed to do stood in front of me now, Brooks Fabric and Sewing the building where my heart had stopped on June 9th, and where if I had anything to say about it, my life would begin again. I stood on the sidewalk in the Asheville winter morning, the low golden sun casting the same slanted light it had thrown across these windows 6 months earlier when I collapsed inside. The air was cold and sharp in my lungs. My cane rested lightly in my right hand, more companion than necessity now. Vera stood beside me, holding the spare set of keys she had kept safe during the entire ordeal, hidden in her own home, never surrendered, never disclosed. "You ready?" she asked quietly. I looked at the faded sign above the door, the peeling paint on the window frames, the worn brick that had witnessed 3.5 decades of my life. "I've been ready for 35 years, I said. "I just forgot for a little while." I took the keys from Vera's hand, stepped forward, and unlocked the heavy door. The small bell above the entrance chimed the same bright, clear sound it had made every single day for 3.5 decades. I had installed that bell myself the first week we opened. My husband had laughed and said it was unnecessary. I had insisted. I wanted to hear every person who walked through that door. I stepped inside. The scent hit me first, deep and familiar textiles and aged wood and the faint ghost of sizing starch. It filled my lungs like coming home. The morning light streamed through the tall front windows, illuminating rows of fabric bolts in jewel tones, emerald velvet, sapphire cotton, ruby wool. They glowed exactly the way they had on opening day in 1988, when my husband and I stood in this exact spot, turned this exact key with nothing but hope and a dream barely held together by a shoestring loan. I had survived his death, raised our son alone, poured everything into these walls, and I had survived this too. But the woman standing here now was not the same woman who had unlocked this door on June 9th. That woman had believed that sacrifice was love, that erasing herself for her family was strength, that asking for help was weakness. This woman, the one holding the keys with steady hands, standing without a guardian breathing without permission, knew better. I walked slowly down the center aisle, running my fingers along the edge of the cutting table. Dust had settled over everything, but the bones of the place were still strong. The industrial sewing machine sat silent in the back corner. The pattern books lined the shelves. The mason jars full of buttons and threads still waited on the counter. Nothing had been sold. Nothing had been lost. Roxanne had tried. She had measured these walls with her broker, calculated the square footage, planned the sale. But Vera's single photograph of that forged signature had stopped it all cold. Behind me, the bell chimed again. Vera entered first, followed by two women whose faces I had not seen since June. Amy, one of the store employees who had worked the fabric counter for 6 years, stepped through the door with tears streaming down her face and a cardboard box of holiday decorations clutched in her arms. She was 28, quick with a smile, and could eyeball yardage better than anyone I had ever trained. "We didn't know if you'd come back," she whispered. Margaret followed close behind the senior seamstress, who taught the Tuesday evening quilting classes and who had been sewing professionally since before I was born. She was 71, sharp-tongued, and fiercely loyal. She brought 2 cups of coffee and a hug so tight it knocked the breath out of me. "You're damn right she came back," Margaret said into my shoulder. Then she pulled away, looked me dead in the eye, and added, "We've got a waiting list of 12 people for January classes. You planning to reopen or just stand here looking nostalgic?" I actually laughed for the first time in months. "We reopen January 2nd, I said. "Tell them to sign up." We worked through the morning, dusting, sweeping, reorganizing. Vera restocked the thread spools by color. Amy hung garland across the front windows. Margaret tested each sewing machine and pronounced them all salvageable with minor repairs. I stood at the cash register updating the inventory logs by hand, my penmanship steady and clear. At 2:15 in the afternoon, my phone rang. I recognized the number. Brent, 3rd time this week. I answered on the 4th ring. "Mom?" he said carefully, his voice still carrying that same exhausted rasp it had held since December 11th. "I was wondering if I could visit. After Christmas, maybe. Just to talk." I looked around the store at Vera, rearranging fabric bolts at Amy, laughing with Margaret near the cutting table at the light streaming through the windows onto floors I had swept 1,000 times. "Ask my attorney about my schedule," I said calmly. "And Brent come alone." There was a pause, then quietly, "I will." I hung up. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way he wanted. But it was a door left slightly open, a threshold he would have to cross entirely on his own strength, proving with actions instead of words that he understood what he had allowed to happen. That open door was not weakness. It was the opposite, the certainty that nothing and no one could take from me what I had fought to reclaim. At 5 o'clock, as the winter sun began to set and the others prepared to leave, I stood at the entrance one last time. Vera paused beside me, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. "You coming?" she asked. "In a minute," I said. She nodded and stepped outside. I stood there alone in the doorway, looking back at the rows of fabric, the cutting table, the sewing machines, the life I had built and nearly lost and fought like hell to reclaim. Then I stepped inside, leaving the front door wide open behind me. Not because I forgot to close it, but because for the first time in months, I no longer had to constantly look back to see what was coming. The future, whatever it held, would find me here standing in the place I had built with my own 2 hands, and I would be ready. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Love doesn't mean letting someone erase you. For 35 years, I believed being a good mother meant sacrificing everything. When my son needed me, I gave without question. I never imagined that same love would be used as a weapon against me. Don't make my mistake. Trust, yes, but verify, even with family. I believe God allowed me to survive that heart attack for a reason. Not just to reclaim my fabric store, but to remind others that strength isn't refusing help. It's refusing to disappear. These revenge stories with Mom at the center aren't just about justice. They're about women who refuse to be buried alive. Family revenge stories like mine prove you can rebuild after betrayal, that documentation saves lives, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. He brought me Dr. Prescott Vera and the strength to stand in that courtroom when I needed it most. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Share this with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. And if you want more revenge stories with Mom who fought back, subscribe to Silent Revenge with Phoenix. These family revenge stories matter because they remind us we are worth fighting for. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details have been fictionalized for storytelling, but the core lesson about dignity, boundaries, and self-worth is what I hope stays with you.